Denmark's government recently stated it has used up all its means for adding more stimulus as the economy shows serious signs of falling into its third recession. Joining me on the line to talk about this more is Niels Ronholt, senior economist at Jyskebank. Niels, what are your thoughts on this statement?
Well, I basically agree, but first of all, you have to recognize that the Danish government economy is, compared to many other countries, still in fairly good shape. We have a government debt just below 46% to GDP, and the budget deficit has only crossed the 3% limit for 1 year. That was last year, where the deficit was 4%. But anyway, it's obvious that right now there's a limit to what you can do further in terms of stimulus. And actually the question comes in two parts here. We have, due to the large deficit last year, which was over the 3% limit, we had a EU procedure to improve our budgets by 1.5% to GDP from 2010 to 2013. And we were very likely to meet that target, but we're pushing the limits here, so there's not really more room to do any fiscal stimulus this year. And looking further ahead, you have in 2014, actually we could maybe do some more there. But then again, with the weak business cycle development, we could be pushing the 3% limit again there. So I guess that's fair to say that there's not much room to do anything there either. But in any case, it's important to not overinterpret the limitations right now, because it's not a story about the government finances being in a very critical shape. It's just a question of the government, I guess you could say, not being willing to risk the relatively strong position right now.
Do you expect Denmark to fall into its third recession?
The discussion of recession is not necessarily very meaningful in Denmark's case. At least it depends on how you do define it. If you think about it as prolonged periods with drops in GDP, we had two periods so far in 2008 and 2009, where we in Denmark, as in many other countries, has had large drops in GDP. And again in 2012, last year, where GDP fell by 0.5%. I expect growth to turn slightly positive this year, and growth overall for 2013 to be slightly positive. But there's no doubt that the weak business cycle development in general will continue. Sometimes you define a recession as a period, at least in Denmark we do, of at least 2 consecutive quarters with drops in GDP. We have had 2 periods of that so far, and we are likely to, or we could have it here in Q1 as well. We have had a drop in GDP in Q4 and could have it again now, and that's why you're talking about a possible third recession. But again, it doesn't make so much. It's not so useful to talk about that for Denmark because GDP is very volatile. As of now, it's impossible to predict whether growth will be positive or negative in Q1. I would say it's fair to say that the economy is still struggling. That's my main picture, and that would not change dramatically regardless of GDP coming out a little over or a little under the zero growth line in Q1.
The Danish government say dedicating more public funds to stimulus would endanger its stable AAA credit rating. Do you think the government is being wise in its decision?
Yeah, basically, yes. I don't see any immediate danger at all of risking the AAA position. As we talked about earlier, the government debt level is very low compared to others. But of course, you don't want to push the limits here. Danish economy is very sensitive to interest rate changes. So, of course, there's a risk here that you could prolong the downturn if interest rate were to increase. But then again, you could also ask yourself, what are the costs of not doing any more fiscal stimulus? I would say that maybe there even if you could do more, maybe would not have any great impact. It's very important to recognize that in Denmark you have a household sector that is going through a consolidation process right now with subdued debt development. And that's a development which is hard to overturn. You could try to speed it up a little by making fiscal stimulus, but as far as I see it, I would say we have done what you can do in terms of that.
Denmark is also yet to recover from a housing bubble, which has caused property prices to fall more than 20% since 2007. How long do you think it would take before we see any kind of recovery in the housing sector?
Well, first of all, it's important to recognize that in some terms it's not really true to say that the housing market has not recovered. It has not normalized yet, but recovered, I would say yes, because you have to remember that the drop in house prices, which were close to 20%, actually, in terms of the main part of that, was 5 years ago in 2008 and 2009. Since then, prices have been relatively stable. We had a slight drop in the second part of 2011, but for the last year, we have had more or less unchanged prices, and the recent figures for the first months of 13 show small increases. But as I said, the housing market is not normalized. You still have a large number of houses for sales. The sales activity is not very high, and of course you could be concerned about the prices going down a little again if unemployment, for instance, starting to pick up. But I would say it's fair to say that the main part of the adjustment of the housing price bubble, which we had, which were built up from 2004 and up until 2007, has been made by now, and actually was made already in 2008 and 2009. So in that terms, I would say the housing market is in Denmark is not normalized, but in terms of price changes, they have been relatively small for quite some time now.
That's all for now, but stay tuned to Dukascopy TV for the latest financial news and updates. Goodbye for now.